All right, hello, wonderful people. Here we are, chapter 3. Okay, I'm using the discussion questions to help me with the overview of this chapter. The first discussion question that I have here in front of me is why is it important for a firm to study and understand the external environment? Well, that seems like a no-brainer, but let's go through it anyways, right? Why should you study? Why should a company, why should a firm study and understand the external environment? Well, here's what I have here in my notes. It says here it allows the firm to identify opportunities to take advantage of, along with threats to avoid. This knowledge allows the firm to choose a strategy that will most likely allow it to achieve its vision. Then we're going to jump right into what are the 7 segments for general environment that are important to study. It's important to study the demographics. It's important to study and this is for firms to study, the demographics, the economics, the social cultural, the physical environment, the technical, global factors, and to include the political, legal factors. Now going back to the small business, which is my expertise, working with companies. Pardon me. I had just one company that wasn't paying attention to political and legal factors that were affecting quality of air qualities here in Alaska. One of the big pushes is trying to clean it up in the wintertime because you get the real cold days and nights, and it forces a lot of those pollutants to stay close to the ground. So when people are burning burning wood that's green in particular, that's not very hasn't been well dried out and seasoned, nor are they using efficient um, wood burning stoves and furnaces, it has a negative impact on the air quality. So there's been lots of laws, lots of political um, debates going on as far as what laws to be written, to what level the laws should be written. And I had one company in particular. His company was devastated by these changes because he had most of his money tied up in inventory that was becoming obsolete. And a lot of people who read it in the front page of the newspaper knew that there were new EPA standards that were coming out for wood stoves and ownerships of wood stoves. So people were not wanting to buy his older, now almost obsolete. They weren't actually obsolete, but as far as having that mental, psychological impact to most people, they were. And imagine now we go to a firm on a large scale that's not paying attention to what's going on as far as those types of factors that can just be devastating to a firm. I remember, because I'm old enough to remember, when many vehicles in this country were huge in size. I mean, just huge, 18, 19, 20-foot long cars. SUVs now are what, 13, 14 feet long. So I'm talking cars that were 5, 6 feet longer than many of your SUVs that you see on the roads today, and they were just massive in size. But all of a sudden, on a global, one of the global factors that came into play was the embargo on oil coming from at that time, the newly formed OPEC countries coming together and actually taking advantage of their power, their influence on a global scale, and really having an impact not only on the price of gasoline, but having an impact on an entire industry, the auto manufacturing industry. And then you think about all of those industries that are tied into the auto industry. So the impact was just massive, and it was just kind of interesting that so many were not plugged into that change in the dynamics in the world. You're just wondering who was asleep at the wheel there. So those global factors, technology comes along. I mean, we'll stay with the auto manufacturing. Technology came along, and Japan was just kicking our tail here in Detroit. When I say our tail, the United States, just kicking our tail when it came to production qualities and the number of productions and the low cost of production. And what did they change from? They went from manual labor to predominantly robotics. They moved the technology, giving them an incredible edge over the United States manufacturing, car manufacturing at that time. And some would say the United States never really truly recovered from that particular lack of foresight. And it's a lack of foresight. So if you happen to have car shares or auto shares, I'm sorry to, for the U.S., I'm sorry to bring you the bearer of bad news. All right, that was somewhat humor, not very good, but I do my best. For instance, it goes on, it says here, economic trends. Think about this with various countries. It talks about how it can affect to the point where it leads to mass departure of people seeking work. And one of the things I had read when China was moving more and more towards the industrial age, at many moons after the U.S. had already gone down that road, but they started to move towards the industrial age along with some attributes of the free market system. A lot of people were looking for work, and they were just wanting to leave the agriculture areas, right, and go into the big cities and the big town where the industrialized jobs and opportunities were there. And so I'm just, because China's so large, I'm just talking just for them domestically. They had mass exodus from their farm belts, for lack of a better term. And of course, we see that from country to country. The United States sometimes has a lot of people at our gates, especially our southern gates, wanting to come in because of the numerous job opportunities that are not available to them in their southern hemisphere of countries there. So it can have a huge impact on as far as the segments of the general environment that you need to be plugged into. Okay, what else do I want to touch on? Oh, we talked about here, even staying with the same topic. One more example the writers give is political and legal changes affect the flow of investment from one country to another. I know just today, this is July 8th, 2015, when I'm putting together this video. Just today I was reading where China was taking some significant hits on the value of shares and some of its industries and some of its businesses. And they as a country are trying to stop the bail of Chinese investors that are within the country, from bailing. But it's kind of like herding cats. Once you start allowing some of that free market into your country attributes, it's hard to turn it off. And of course, the foreign for the Chinese, the foreign investors, obviously, if they feel threatened, they'll bail. So it can have a real negative impact on not only the economics of an entire country, but when we look at the country compared to an industry. And even better yet, to a business, you can just imagine this domino effect, how it can have an impact on a business, can have an impact on a local community, and even a country. It's just, to me, just incredible stuff. Okay, another thing the writers wanted to go over was Michael Porter's 5 forces of talking about potential entrants, substitute products, bargaining power of buyers and of suppliers, and the rivalry amongst firms. It says here from my notes from your textbook, these 5 forces operate in an industry, reveal the profitability potential of the industry, and determine whether the organization would be wise to enter the industry. Very good. The 5 forces describe the threats that are inherent in an industry. To kind of a little bit of redundancy there, but just to wrap it up. Then it went over in this particular chapter, and I'm looking at discussion question that goes, what are the 3 components necessary to conduct a competitive analysis? And it talks about how the competitive analysis requires, it says here in my notes, a competitor's strategic intent. Okay, what does that mean? Well, again, from my notes. Strategic intent is defined as compelling statement about where an organization is going, how it distinctly conveys a sense of what the organization wants to achieve long term. Again, we're going over strategic intent. So, and this was put together by the University of Illinois. So again, let me read that one more time to you. Strategic intent is defined by compelling statement about where an organization is going that distinctly conveys a sense of what the organization wants to achieve long term. So that's one of the analysis points that were identified within the chapter. The next it went over is the competitors' current strategies, and of course then it wraps up with the competitors' strengths and weaknesses, which has been covered quite lengthily in your textbook. One of the things I like to look at when I'm looking at current strategy obviously is important, and looking at oftentimes these current strategies are out there for us to look at, be the vision statements and mission statements. And of course, if we get a chance, it's a public company, they'll look at their overall strategic statements. Going back to competitor strengths and weaknesses. Looking at weaknesses, one of the things these are some of the things I like to bring to the surface. Make sure when I'm looking at weaknesses, what are the needs for improvement? When I'm looking at competitors' weaknesses, where do they lack resources? And what are they avoiding? Right? I mean, I can tell you a lot about a company or a competitor. And then some of the strengths. My favorite, of course, what makes them the money? What is driving? I like to look at their highest, if I can get my hands on the information, their highest return on investments, where do they do their best work, what makes them the most money, what's driving that? Is it a great R&D program? Is it a great culture that they work within due to their entrepreneurial cultures or marketing cultures that they install within their organization? And of course, then I have on here, what's behind the curtain, identifying what they do well. And sometimes that can be a little bit difficult to, your due diligence may have to, your research will have to be extensive sometimes to figure out what is it, what is, because looking at their sales, looking at, what they do well, but understanding the entire concept. When we look at somebody like Google, immediately most of my students go, yeah, that's a company I would like to work for. When I ask them why, they're like, well, I get to wear blue jeans and a t-shirt. I go, do you really think that's it? I mean, is that the quality that Google is looking for? What does their HR look like, and how do they maintain these when they're doing their fills for a need in a company? Are they doing it internally and externally, or are they doing just one over the other predominantly? I mean, what are they doing that makes it an attractive company? If it's to wear t-shirts and blue jeans, I mean, there's lots of companies you can go work t-shirts and blue jeans, right? I mean, they're out there. So if that's your number one reason, so it's not. And when we start to drill down, we start to chat, especially if we start to chat and we do research on the company, we get a chance to talk with people who have worked for them, if not already work or presently work for them. We get a little insight, we get a little understanding of the culture and how much of an impact it has on people wanting to go work for them. Okay. And Google has a great reputation for being very, very quality management incorporated within their culture. They really, really practice quality management techniques. Okay, what else do I have here? Question from the writers. When would a competitor likely respond to a strategic competitive move? And it says here it's highly dependent. It says here a competitor will respond to a firm's action if the competitor is highly dependent on the market. And if they're highly dependent on the market, I have here market dependence is the extent to which a firm's revenues or profits are derived from a particular market. So there's your definition for market dependence. So again, back to the answer. Competitors will respond to a firm's action if the competitor is highly dependent on the market. And the original question was, when will the competitor likely respond to a strategic competitive move? So I'm looking at that, and what I'm getting from there is that if I'm in an industry and I understand my strengths, and I see a move within the industry, I am gonna really take advantage of my strengths within the industry. Of course, to be able to take advantage of my strength, or the company's strength within the industry, I have to I be able to identify, or already have identified, what they are. And it says here, the writers go on to say, a firm that will want to avoid attacking a competitor where it is strong and instead attack where it's weak. So when you can identify, your own strengths, and then of course identify the strengths and weaknesses of other companies, it's just going to make you or help you with sagacious decision making. When it comes to, they use the word attack. I find that to be a little strong of a word, but it works. All right, and last but not least, to kind of wrap up this particular overview of the chapter, how can complementors add value to a firm's competitive situation? And I have here, competitors are a network of companies that will sell goods or services that are complementary to another firm's goods or service. And a great example I can't improve on, or at least initially I couldn't think of something to improve on that was better than the auto or the vehicle manufacturing industry, which we talked about earlier. It says here that dealing with that particular industry, the range of complements that is necessary to sell vehicles, you have things like luxury items, you have all those finance companies that get involved in the mix, etc. Okay, well, hopefully I didn't go through that too rapidly, but if you have any questions, get a hold of me. Let's chat. If you want to chat with your fellow students, and you you have an epiphany and you're like, I've got to share this with the world, please do. Of course, you could work those into your videos when you're doing those video assignments. I'd love to see an epiphany being highlighted and being shared with the rest of us. Okay, for today, well, for this chapter, it's a hot summer day. I'm not sure what it's going to be like when you're watching this in the fall, but I have a feeling it's not going to be nearly as warm for those of you who call Alaska home. All right, we'll chat with you soon.